Imagine seducing your coworker to kill your husband, then ending up pregnant in prison for another inmate. This is the twisted, unbelievable case of Spain's Black Widow. Welcome to the Silent Files, where real crimes reveal hidden truths. Before we begin, please take a second to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new true crime story. Thanks for subscribing. Today's story takes us to Valencia, Spain, a city bathed in Mediterranean sun, filled with Gothic architecture, colorful plazas, and the scent of orange blossoms in the air. But nestled inside this postcard-perfect city is a quiet neighborhood called Patraix. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave hello, where days pass without drama, until in the summer of 2017, that peace was shattered by a single calculated act of violence. A man was ambushed in his own garage, murdered in silence. The killer had a key, and the person who gave it to him was much closer than anyone expected. At the center of this tragedy was Maje Moreno Cantó, known simply as Mai. Born in 1990 and raised in Valencia, she came from a respected religious family. On the surface, she was the picture of grace, a trained nurse, well-spoken, charismatic. Friends described her as sweet, confident, and always put together. But beneath that polished exterior was something else entirely. In her 20s, Maje was social, flirtatious, someone who enjoyed attention. Even before her marriage, she was known to juggle relationships in secret. Seduction came naturally to her, honesty, less so. Her husband, Antonio Navarro Cerdan, was the opposite. Born in 1981 in the nearby town of Novelda, he worked as an industrial engineer, logical, grounded, and calm. Antonio was described by friends as noble, responsible, and loyal to a fault. He had never been in a serious relationship before Maje. She was his first and only. They married in September 2016, blending two worlds, her bright, polished social life with his calm, work-focused demeanor. Neighbors saw them as the ideal couple, in love, in sync, building a future. Just weeks before their wedding, Antonio learned of her affair with a physiotherapist. He chose to forgive her, trusting their bond would survive. Yet that decision would set the stage for a much deeper betrayal. But while Antonio was still trying to build a life together, Maje was already building something else, a secret relationship that would become her most dangerous weapon. His name was Salvador Rodrigo La Piedra, a 39-year-old nursing assistant at the same hospital where Maje worked. Quiet, unassuming, lonely. He'd been divorced for several years, and when Maje turned her attention to him, he was hooked almost instantly. To Salvador, Maje was electric. The way she smiled, the way she listened, the way she made him feel needed, it all felt real. What he didn't see was how carefully she was pulling the strings. Maje told Salvador that Antonio was abusive, that she was afraid, that she felt trapped in her marriage. But there was never any evidence to support those claims. No police reports, no complaints, nothing in Antonio's past to suggest he was ever violent or controlling. She painted herself as a victim, helpless, misunderstood, desperate for a way out. And Salvador, he wanted to be her hero, the man who would save her from the man she claimed to fear. The affair began in secret, quiet meetings, intimate messages, long phone calls late at night. But what Salvador didn't realize was that he wasn't falling in love. He was being groomed, because Maje wasn't just cheating, she was planning. As the weeks went on, Salvador's obsession deepened, and so did Maje's manipulation. She began guiding the conversation toward one chilling possibility. What if Antonio was gone? What if they didn't have to hide anymore? What if they could be together, finally, openly, if only this one obstacle was removed? Salvador didn't see it as a murder plot. Not yet. He saw it as sacrifice, as love, as doing what needed to be done for the woman he adored. And Maje knew exactly how to keep him in that mindset. She never demanded. She suggested. She never ordered. she implied. And each time she cried to him on the phone about how Antonio made her feel small, Salvador became more convinced he was doing the right thing. Eventually, she gave him the key to the underground garage, told him when Antonio would be home, what time he usually parked, how long he'd take to get out of the car. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't unsure. She was composed, calm, calculated. And by the time Salvador realized how far he'd gone, he was already too deep to turn back. August 16th, 2017. It was a warm Wednesday evening in Patraix. The streets of Valencia had already begun to quiet down. Shops were closing. Families were sitting down to dinner. And beneath it all, below the apartments, under layers of concrete, Antonio Navarro was coming home. He drove into the underground garage like he always did. Same car, same spot, same routine. But this time, someone was waiting in the shadows. Salvador had arrived earlier and parked out of sight. He waited in silence, the key Maje had given him already in his hand. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't need to. As Antonio stepped out of his car, Salvador approached from behind. What happened next took seconds, but it ended a life. Antonio was stabbed multiple times and collapsed beside the vehicle. The garage echoed with nothing but the sound of his last breath. There was no robbery, nothing stolen, no sign of forced entry, just a body and silence. Salvador disappeared into the night. Maje was at work, smiling at patients, answering calls, playing the part. She had orchestrated everything and left not a single fingerprint behind. In the hours after the murder, Maje played her role to perfection. She cried in front of Antonio's family. She posted heartbreaking tributes on social media. She stood beside his casket with tears in her eyes. To the outside world, she looked like a woman devastated by loss. But the detectives assigned to the case weren't convinced. There were too many things that didn't add up. The lack of struggle, the precise timing, the fact that whoever killed Antonio used a key that only a few people should have had. So they dug deeper. They pulled phone records, checked cell tower data, cross-referenced location pings, and slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Maje had made 12 calls to Salvador the day of the murder, some within hours, some within minutes. And Salvador's phone? It had pinged in the exact area of the garage at the exact time of the attack. The digital trail was clear. But what came next was even more telling. When detectives brought Salvador in for questioning, he didn't resist. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't even seem surprised. And after just a few hours, he confessed. He told them everything. How Maje had claimed Antonio was abusive. How she'd promised they could be together. How she gave him the key, the time, the plan. He admitted to the stabbing, but insisted he wasn't acting alone. "She told me it was the only way," he said. "She made me believe it was right." With that, the mask slipped. The grieving widow was now the suspected mastermind of her husband's murder. On January 15th, 2018, 5 months after Antonio's death, Maje Moreno Cantó was arrested. At first, she denied everything, said Salvador acted alone, claimed she had no idea he was capable of something like this. But the phone records didn't lie. The call logs, the messages, the stories that matched just a little too well. Investigators weren't just building a murder case. They were building a profile, a woman who used love like a weapon and betrayal as a tool. In November 2020, over 3 years after Antonio's murder, the trial of Maria Jesus Moreno Cantó began. The courtroom in Valencia was packed. Journalists, family members, curious locals. Everyone wanted to see the woman the media had already dubbed La Viuda Negra, the Black Widow of Patraix. Maje walked in poised, polished, and eerily calm. No emotion, no cracks in her voice, just soft-spoken answers and the occasional tilt of the head. Her defense team tried to paint her as a woman trapped in a toxic marriage. They said Salvador acted alone. that he misinterpreted her words, that she never asked him to kill, but prosecutors had 52 pieces of evidence, dozens of phone calls, WhatsApp messages, GPS data, testimony from co-workers who said Maje openly talked about her flings, and the most damning of all, the timeline. She'd spoken to Salvador immediately before and immediately after the murder. Salvador took the stand too. His voice cracked as he repeated it again. "I did it for her." The jury didn't take long. Maje was found guilty of orchestrating her husband's murder. She was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Salvador received 17, but the story wasn't over. In July 2023, 3 years into her sentence, Maje made headlines again. She had given birth to a baby boy while serving time in Fontcalent prison in Alicante. The father, another inmate, someone she met behind bars. Once again, Maje had found a way to control her environment, to seduce, to bond, to build new relationships even from inside a prison cell. She was transferred to the prison's mother-child unit, where she was allowed to live with the child under Spanish law. She'll remain there until the boy turns 3, sometime in 2026. After that, the child will be taken into care, and Maje will return to the general population. Photos from the prison circulated online, blurry shots of a stroller, rumors of special privileges, speculation about how she got pregnant in such a controlled environment. The public was stunned. How does a convicted murderer, already known for seduction and manipulation, find love and start a new life from inside a prison wall? By 2024, the story of Maje Moreno Cantó had taken on a life of its own. Podcasts dissected it, documentaries replayed it, and in 2025, Netflix dramatized it in a Spanish-language thriller called La Viuda Negra, A Widow's Game. In the series, Maje is portrayed not just as a manipulator, but as a woman with ice in her veins, someone who seduced, plotted, lied, and barely blinked as her husband bled out in a garage beneath their home. Some viewers were horrified, others were fascinated, but most agreed on one thing. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a performance, control, cold calculation disguised as helplessness. Antonio's family, meanwhile, has lived in quiet grief. His father called Maje's behavior inhuman. Her own brother publicly disowned her, saying, "If she's guilty, she's no longer my sister." Maje remains in prison today, raising her son in a unit meant for rehabilitation. But despite the overwhelming evidence, she has never publicly acknowledged what she did, and has never expressed a word of remorse. For many, that's the part that hurts most. A quiet neighborhood, a loyal husband, a calculated betrayal. Now you've seen the full story. What would justice look like to you? Was 22 years enough for what Maje did? Should someone who orchestrated a murder be allowed to raise a child in prison? And what about Salvador? Was he really manipulated, or was he just looking for an excuse? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories where love, lies, and murder collide, subscribe to The Silent Files. Because here, real crimes reveal hidden truths. Thanks for watching.